I have Josephine Sunny, who's the Afrobarometer Communications Coordinator for Anglophone West Africa in the studio. Good morning, Josephine.
Good morning.
So interesting report here. Did we expect these findings?
Well, I would say they're quite a bit surprising, because we all know that the economy has even in the run of the 2016 elections, the economy was actually one of the big issues that came up during the campaign season, both for the incumbent governments and the former governments in power. And we also know that the economic issues have always been one of the important issues that Ghanaians actually want citizens to address. So remember last week we came out with a question on one of our findings on the most important problems. And even though for the first time it was infrastructure, when we do the trend analysis, you see that consistently it's been one economic issue or the other. So it's either been unemployment or the management of the economy. And so we know that Ghanaians place a lot of premium on economic issues. But we also know that, so the survey was conducted between 16 September and 3rd October 2019. And we know that around that time, there were quite a lot of interesting things happening in the economic outlook of Ghana, because we know that IMF and the World Bank actually adjudged Ghana as the fastest growing economy. We also had we had the decline of inflation and interest rates, but there were also some lows. We all know about the cleanup of the banking sector that caused like thousands of losses of jobs, and there were increases in tariffs, etc. So, well, maybe when we are looking at these findings, we should look at the context as well.
I mean, some of the key findings, the most common form of deprivation experienced by most Ghanaians is the lack of a cash income. About 3/4 of respondents went without a cash income at least once during the previous year, including 28% who did so many times or always. What exactly does that mean? Are people saying that they don't have money in their pockets?
So there is this question we asked. So, you know, there are various ways of measuring poverty. We have a lot of indexes, but Afrobarometer goes with the school of thought that the best way to measure poverty is by the experience of the individual. So we have what we call the lived poverty index, which is like an experiential measure of the deprivation of certain basic necessities in the past 12 months. So the basic necessities that we look at are cash income, food, water, medical care, and cooking fuel. But when you look at all these, you realize that the highest form of deprivation, like you said, was cash income, where we have like 72% of Ghanaians saying that they went without cash income at least once in the previous year. And it's sort of in line with the issue of unemployment, because again, looking at the most important priorities, we see that even now that infrastructure is the first, unemployment is still the second. And it's consistently being an issue for Ghanaians. So.
I mean, medical care, so a third or fewer went without medical care, 32%. And then there was also not enough food as well. And then there's something called lived poverty, which apparently is also quite high.
So the measure, like I said, we use these deprivations to measure what we call the lived poverty index. So we do like an average and then put it on a score of 0 to 4. So 0 means that you had no experience with any deprivation. You weren't deprived.
Okay, so that's what lived poverty means. It's like poverty that you're living in poverty.
Yeah, so if you experience a high level of lived deprivation, then it's high lived poverty. Then moderate excess. So those in the no lived poverty zone actually didn't experience any
poverty at all
of the basic necessities that we left.
So the things that would determine this is whether they've had enough food to eat, whether they were able to go to the hospital when they were sick.
So we asked, it's actually the other way around, whether they went without any of these necessities in the past year. So if you went without it, like to a very high extent, then you are put in the high lived poverty range. You get it. So then no lived poverty means that you didn't lack any of these at all.
So then it doesn't look too bad. And because if you combine no-lived poverty and low-lived poverty, you're looking at 78%.
Yeah.
And then moderate 19%, and then high-lived 4%. So we're saying that about
and high, it's about just about
23%, yes, of people.
And if you compare it to the previous round of survey that was conducted in 2017, you see that there's just been a modest change. So it's just about a 4 percentage point change compared to 2014. But there are some other interesting findings that we shared, and one of them is with the direction of the country. So we asked the respondents if they think the country is going in the right direction or the wrong direction. And we have about close to 6 in 10 Ghanaians, that's like 59%, saying that the country is going in the wrong direction.
That's interesting.
Now, with those who are saying the country is going in the right direction, that's just about a third of Ghanaians, so that's like 35%.
Okay.
Now, when you compare that to those who said the country was going in the right direction in 2017, there's been a decline. There's like a 15 percentage point decline compared. So in 2017, we had like a half of 50% saying that
wrong direction, good direction. But now more people feel that we're going in the wrong direction.
Now, when you compare, so 2014, we had just 15% of Ghanaians saying the country is going in the right direction.
Okay.
Between 2014 and 2017, the proportion more than tripled. So we had from 15% a jump to 50% saying that the country was going in the right direction. And now it's fallen again to 35%.
That's interesting, Another interesting aspect that we should talk about is taxes. And so higher taxes with more governments. Do people, your questions were, is it better to pay higher taxes if it means that there'll be more services provided by the government, or is it better to pay lower taxes even if it means that there'll be fewer services provided? And 31% were happy with higher taxes. So actually 31% agreed very strongly, and then 17% agreed. So that would be 48% saying that.
So you see that Ghanaians are almost evenly split when it comes to the issue of either having to pay more taxes for more development or less taxes for
less development.
Yes. And so, I mean, we've done all the talking, we've complained, because few Ghanaians are happy about the current economic conditions. Few of them are happy about their present living conditions. And when it comes to the assessment of government's performance, when it comes to 4 indicators of economic performance, that's management of the economy, creating unemployment, improving the living standards of the poor, etc., you realize that with all these 4 indicators, the approval ratings have fallen.
Okay.
But then when it comes to how much are we willing to
actually pay
for development, then we're split.
That's quite interesting. And taxes for the rich versus for ordinary people. The question was, do you think that the amount of taxes that the ordinary people in Ghana are required to pay to the government is too little, too much? Or about the right, do you think that the amount of taxes that rich people in Ghana are required to pay to the government is too little?
Now, that's also another very interesting point, because you see that those who are saying, so we have like 4 in 10, close to 4 in 10, saying that the taxes that the ordinary people are paying are either far too much or somewhat too much. Now, the same proportion are saying that the taxes that the rich are paying are either far too little or somewhat too little. And so we also have some other findings on taxes where a lot of Ghanaians, about 3/4 of Ghanaians are saying that the government should ensure that those in the informal sector and like petty traders
are paying their taxes.
So they want government to sort of like increase the taxness. And then they are also saying that it is fair to tax the rich, a higher proportion than the poor.
I mean, talking about Ghanaians and what they're saying, we went on the streets, and here are some of the views that you had on what's going on in the country.
Yeah, it's very, very bad. We are all suffering. Just imagine, this morning I bought eating tangerine, instead of maybe eating proper food or breakfast. But it's like I can't afford any of this thing than to manage the tangerine as my breakfast. I can't say good, I'll say bad. Because as an ordinary person there, I'll say I'm suffering.
I think it's fairly good. The reason why I'm saying is that they are still laying the foundations from the previous government, and they are trying to work things out. You know, recently, because of the banking crisis, there has been a lot of problems. Formerly, you could borrow from a lot of money from these financial companies. Well, now you cannot do that. But if they bring sanity into the system, it will work well for the future for Ghana.
The economy, dear, when you are looking into it, it's not. We thought things will change after the change. Voting, but still, we are not seeing top cry. I don't know. I'll rate the economy like from 5, average.
For me, I think it's not all that bad though. I think the government is doing a bit well with the free SHS thing. If we give him a lot of time, he can do better. For me, the problem I have with politicians as a whole is the promises they give and they cannot deliver. We have bad roads everywhere. Everywhere you go, the roads are bad. Politicians will come and then they will tell you that, oh, we will fix this for you. After they get the power, you will not see them again. For us, the only thing we gain is to get basic amenities. Our roads are good. We have water. We have electricity. As a citizen, that's the only thing we gain. So if we vote for you to come to power, the basic things that we need, you should be able to provide it for us.
It's fairly good. Why am I saying that? It depends on where you are. If you are really at the grassroots, you don't really feel it much as compared to maybe those who are working in the government institutions and all that. Because with them, anytime there's like allowances or anything, they feel it directly. But when you are with the private sector, when they want, before they give you allowances or anything like that. That's why I'm saying that it depends on where you are. So if you are fitted in a certain part of the economic thing, that's when you feel whether it is good for you or it is bad.
I would say the economic condition as we speak now, it's not good. As I am saying, it's not good is that the way things are, the way our leaders are inflating things, it's not the way that it was when the old government was in power. Though I am not going to speak politics here, but we want the people in the country to feel comfortable and relaxed. Nowadays, the way they are increasing fuel prices, the way they are increasing electricity tariff, and in the way they are increasing our credit. The credits that we used to do call, nowadays when you purchase 20 cedis, they will do deduction. And then when they do the deduction, they should let you know that they are deducting this from the amount. At first, when you buy, we know that they were doing the deduction, but it will not reflect on the money that you are purchasing. But nowadays, the way things are going, I will say that it's not good. And then we would like our people who lead in the country to be able to put things in place for we, the citizens, to feel comfortable and relaxed. Thank you.
And those were some of your views. But Josephine and I are continuing to talk about the Afrobarometer report. And this that you have on your screen now is comparing the demographics. So one of the ladies who was talking in the Vox Pops did talk about the fact that there's some things that you feel more in the rural areas and in the urban areas. It's also interesting that there's also a difference between men and women. There's also, depending on the ages, the way that we perceive things and the way that we are looking at the economic conditions. Do you want to just go through this and explain to us why there seems to be such a difference in the way?
So actually, when you look at the negative perceptions of the country's economic conditions and the people's personal living conditions, you realize that it's actually widespread across all the demographics, because it's all like most of them are in the majority, right? But you realize that the less educated, that means that those who have just maybe primary education or no formal education, and the respondents in the rural areas and the youth are more likely to say that their economic conditions or their personal living conditions are bad. So then these, even though the perceptions are widespread, they are stronger among the youth, those with the less educated, and those in the rural areas, as compared to the highly educated, the older citizens, and the urban residents. So, yeah.
I see. That's very interesting. And then there's also another aspect of the report, the looking back. So when we compare the economy as it is now as compared to 12 months ago, and how we see that it will be in the next 12 months. That was also quite interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we asked them, the first question was like, looking back, how do you think, what we asked them to compare the country's present economic conditions to 12 months ago. And we have about close to a half, about 47% saying that now, compared to 12 months ago, the country's economic conditions are worse.
Wow.
Okay, and then so that outweighs the proportion who are saying that the country's economic conditions are better now. That's just about 3 in 10, like 31%. But we also asked them that looking ahead, so in the next 12 months, how do you think the country's economic conditions are going to be? And a majority of Ghanaians are quite optimistic.
Hopeful.
Yes, that the country's economic conditions are going to get better in the next 12 months. So we have about 57% saying that the country's economic conditions are going to be better in the next 12 months compared to now.
I wonder what they're using to judge. I wonder what the metrics are, because I mean, if so many people are saying, okay, it's actually not so good, but then these same people are hopeful, pretty hopeful that in a year's time it would be way better. It's interesting.
Well, it could be a number of things.
Could it be free SHS? Could it be some of the policies that the NDP
You know, when I started, I was like, there had been quite a lot of good reviews, and government also had started some of these social interventions, all in the bid to make the living conditions of Ghanaians better. So free SHS was supposed to relieve the parents of like certain amounts that they would have spent on education, etc. So it could be that maybe they haven't felt those positive interventions yet, and so they're hopeful that in the next 12 months it would. Yeah, it could be.
Let's talk about this aspect for a second, the most important problems in Ghana. So, of course, infrastructure and roads topped the list.
Yes, and I think that pretty much echoes the conversations that we had been having, especially on the media. There had been a lot of complaints about infrastructure, roads, etc. And so it wasn't too surprising that for the very first time since we started asking this question, infrastructure and roads were cited as the most important problems that Ghanaians want governments to address.
It's interesting where electricity is.
Yeah.
I mean, it tells us how far we've come from the days of Doomsor.
What I actually find most interesting is where corruption is, because you would think that corruption would be a very important problem for Ghanaians, seeing that it sort of translates into a lot of things, like even the provision of infrastructure,
everything, health,
jobs,
education, unemployment.
But well, it looks like Ghanaians are not really concerned.
Well, either that or maybe we've kind of accepted it as part of our fabric, and so it's like maybe we're not just too worried about it. Very interesting. Water supply is the farming, agriculture, and finally, crime and security is way at the bottom.
Yeah. But also, one thing worth noting here is that even though infrastructure is now the first, we also see some economic issues featuring prominently here. So we have unemployment as number 2, and consistently unemployment. So for 2017, unemployment was the first most important problem. 2014, like consistently in the past, I think it was only one of the rounds that I think 2014 that citizens cited economic management, right? So we see unemployment here, and then we also see the management of the economy. So even though infrastructure is still the first, Ghanaians are still concerned about aspects of the economic management.
So farming and agriculture, which aspects of farming and agriculture are Ghanaians wanting the government to address?
So usually how we ask this question, it's an open-ended question. We ask them to list 3 most important problems that they want government to address, and then we recode them into some of these sections. So like they give a varied number of responses, and then we sort of like code them. So I don't have that offhand.
As in specifically what they're interested in. So apart from roads, in terms of infrastructure, what are Ghanaians worried about?
So infrastructure is basically everything else, the schools, hospitals, all those buildings pretty
basically. Much, yeah. So we don't want to see our children going to school under trees. We want better healthcare facilities, better roads. Okay.
And you know, the issues of even hospitals that had been built and hadn't been opened, etc. were also important issues that were being discussed then. So, yeah. And then, so we also asked about how well they think government is doing in addressing these important problems. And we had just 17% of Ghanaians saying that the government is doing a fairly well or very well in addressing their most important problems.
Okay, so on this slide, Josephine, we have the country's economic condition, citizens, okay, Ghana, but then we're comparing from 2002 to 2019.
Yeah, but I think we probably should look at just between 2017 and 2000, or from 2014 up to 2019.
Okay.
So you see that with the present economic conditions, from 2014, it rose to 35%. Those who are saying that the country's economic conditions are good.
Okay.
Up to 35, that's like almost like a 21 percentage point increase. And then we see that between 2017 and 2019, it has declined modestly by 5 percentage points.
Okay.
Again, with the citizens' present living conditions, as of 2014, it was at 21%. And then it jumped to 37%.
7%, and it
but
stayed
it
there.
hasn't changed.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So people's living conditions, they feel, are generally have gotten better over the past over the past 5 years, from 21% to 37%.
Yes, yes.
So they feel that it has gotten better. They also feel that the present economic conditions have gotten better.
Yeah, but it's still quite low, because if we have just 3 in 10 Ghanaians saying that the present conditions are good,
and that's still 6 in 10 or 7 in 10 who are struggling.
Yes, there's actually 6 in 10 who are saying that either the economic conditions are bad or their living conditions are bad. So with those who are saying the economic conditions are bad, that's about 62%. And then we have about 58% saying that their living conditions are bad.
The country going in the right direction, we've discussed this, but the fact that there's it's almost, it kind of comes together. 2017, it came together, didn't it? Same amount of people, and then there was a divergence, 59 going in the wrong direction with 35 going in the right direction. I remember that at this point, we also said that even though it's like this, people are pretty hopeful that next year it will get better.
Well, that actually is, it's interesting, because so when we asked about the direction of if the economy is going to get better in the next 12 months, we saw a majority saying that the economy is going to get better in the next 12 months. But then we also have a majority saying that the country is going in the wrong direction. So how is it going to come back from the wrong direction, come to zero and go there? I told you, everything is possible with God, which really is our general attitude. I guess being optimistic keeps us alive here in Ghana, doesn't it? Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Just before you go, how can we get copies of this? If we want it, well, I have it, but if anybody wants copies of it. The findings are on the website, so if you go to www.afrobarometer.org or www.cddgh.org, you see the findings there.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning.